September 23rd, 2009, Stockholm, Sweden. At the break of dawn, the city was still fast asleep, except for the Swedish police that was rushing towards Västerberga district of the city. An unknown helicopter had just landed on the roof of Stockholm's biggest cash repository. Meanwhile, in Meeting, Swedish police helicopter crew received an emergency call and were ordered to provide immediate air support. The pilots immediately leave their barracks and dash towards the hangar a few hundred yards away. As they reach the entry gate, one of the pilots, Anders Johannesson, leaps out of the car to open the gate, but notices something unusual sitting at the hangar doors. It seemed to be some kind of a box with a red flashing light on top of it. To address their concern, they slowly creep towards the hangar to have a closer look. Upon inspection, they realize the mysterious box is actually a bomb that is about to go off. Except it does not. It's a fake bomb with very conveniently "bomb" written on it. However, this fake bomb would be unfolding more devastation than any conventional detonation in the history of Sweden. In the early morning of September 23, 2009, a highly secure building called the G4S Cash Repository was going under its normal night shift operation, and the city would require huge sums of cash flow as it was Friday and there would be a surge in withdrawals on the weekends. For this reason, the repository was operating at peak capacity with roughly around $150 million stored in hard cash. Few armored trucks waited at the vault basement for the cash to be loaded and supplied around the city in banks, offices, and ATMs. That night, the office was operating under the command of Oscar Lindgren with 22 more staff members. More than half a dozen were working in the office section, while few with Lindgren were in the secure cash counting facility on the 6th floor. The cash counters were working tirelessly, breaking the silence of a peaceful Swedish night. However, at around 5 a.m., the noises from the machine suddenly appeared to be getting louder. The staff assumed it must be the truck starting up for the supply shift. However, their assumptions quickly fell apart as the windows started to vibrate more violently with every passing second. Lindgren ordered the staff member to turn off the cash counters to figure where the sound could be coming from. Helpless and confused, the staff started to look for the source of this unusual sound and vibration. A few seconds later, Lindgren gets out of the cash room and runs to the skylight gallery. Upon looking up, he gets baffled with what he sees: a red and white helicopter hovering right over the skylight pyramid. He immediately realized the cause of the vibration. This was very shocking to the entire staff because the G4S building did not have any helipad on its rooftop, so there was no logical reason for a helicopter to be hovering so low over a building. Except the reason was way more horrifying than anyone could have guessed. The helicopter was carrying a group of masked men who were about to descend on the G4S building. Their intention? To steal as much cash as possible and fly away into the breaking dawn. And Lindgren, the prime witness of it all, kept wondering how you get yourself a helicopter to steal some cash. Few weeks before the heist, two men meet at the docks of Skeppsholmen Island in Stockholm. Few minutes later, a third man named Goran Bojovic arrives and sits with the other two. Bojovic asks the men to prepare their minds for a big business he's planning. He tells them he knows a place full of cash and the only way in and out is gonna be from above. The other two ask how they're gonna do it. Bojovic, with a straight face, tells them, "I'll get the helicopter, you guys do the groundwork." After a detailed discussion and plenty of wild ideas, all the three men leave the dock. Few hours later, Bojovic gets in touch with a man named Milan Sivo, a former Stockholm mafia figure who had relocated to Belgrade, and asks him to provide logistical support for the mission he was planning. Bojovic drives to the airport and flies directly to Belgrade to meet Sivo in person. In few days, Bojovic flies to several countries before returning back to Sweden. Back in Stockholm, Stockholm, he contacts a man named Charbil Charo, the same man he met earlier on Skepsholmen Island. Charo had been to jail for petty theft in the past, but now worked as a school teacher in southern Stockholm. Bojovic asks Charo to buy 5 prepaid phones so that they can establish a secure network for their operation. Charo purchases 5 phones and hands them over to Bojovic, which he distributes among the crew with their respective assignments. Bojovic, while handing over the phone to one of the crew members named Nemanja Alec, asks him to do a little investigation about helicopters. But no ordinary helicopters. He asks Nemanja to drive to a base in Mitting, where Swedish police operated their helicopters from. Nemanja probes the heliport in Mitting and notes the active time of operations, what time the pilots would close down the hangar before returning to their barracks. All the information from the crew is communicated to Bojovic. Bojovic gets in touch with Sevo again and tells him all the preparations are done and the mission is a go. September 23, 2009. At around 2:30 a.m., Nemanja Alec hides in the woods just outside the heliport and waits for the last flight to land. Few minutes later, the bird lands and pilots shut it down. They lock down the hangar, get in their car, and drive off to their barracks. As the pilots leave, Alec crosses the empty dark road and bolts towards the hangar driveway. He places 2 bombs on either side of hangar doors and runs back towards the exit. Once confirmed the bombs are in place, he contacts Bojovic to update the information. Meanwhile, 100 miles north of Stockholm, 4 masked men break into a commercial hangar in Norrtälje. They drag a Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter out onto the tarmac, get it off the platform, and start it up. Around 4:43 a.m., the chopper lifts off. During the same time, the Swedish radar surveillance picks up the blip on their radar. At around 5 a.m., the helicopter flies low and slow towards Västerberga district. Few people on the ground also notice low-flying chopper heading towards G4S. At G4S, Oscar Lindgren and his staff gets confused by the loud sounds and heavy vibrations. Lindgren asks the staff to turn off cash counters to investigate the source of the sound. He then leaves the cash room and heads towards the skylight atrium. Moments later, a red and white chopper appears right over the skylight pyramid of G4S complex, illuminating the black and damp roof of the building. Around 5:15 a.m., the pilot skillfully lands the bird between the skylight and the edge of the building. 3 men disembark the chopper. One pulls out the sledgehammer and starts bashing the glass in an attempt to break it. Meanwhile, the other 2 untie 2 20-foot ladder they had brought with them tied to the side of the helicopter. After a few attempts, the glass gives way. 3 men lower the ladder from the broken glass and climb down to the central atrium. Lundgren, in total disbelief, bolts back to the cash room and presses the panic alarm and contacts the head of security. The Swedish police receives the alarm from G4S in Västerberga and dispatches patrol straight to the site. The 3 men blow out the bulletproof glass of the adjacent wall, enter the office, and a few feet away find themselves standing at the cash room steel door. They break open the wall door and get inside the cash room. The staff members quickly exit the cash room and find their safety in the corner of the floor. The crew cut open state-of-the-art secure padlocks with a buzz saw and fill the bags with as much cash as possible. Meanwhile, in Mitting, the Swedish pilots receive the emergency call from the headquarters and are ordered to provide immediate air support. The pilots dash towards the hangar. At the barrier gate, one of the pilots sees an unusual box with red light sitting at the hangar door. On closer inspection, he notifies his co-pilot that it's probably a bomb and they can't risk taking off, so they retreat back to a safe distance, waiting for the bomb squad to arrive. Meanwhile, in Stockholm, the Swedish police find themselves a few blocks away from G4S, stuck on the road. It's because some of the crew members peppered either side of the street with caltrops and spiked chains so that no backup could reach the building from the ground floor, or at least they are delayed by a few minutes. At G4S, after loading up the cash, all 3 members climb up the ladder and get into the chopper. Once on board, the pilot lifts off and flies away in the breaking dawn. The police on the ground in sheer disbelief watch the bird fly away. The helicopter flies freely in the sky with no police choppers to chase them. It flies to 2 different locations, dropping off crew members before finally landing in woods north of Stockholm in Täby. The pilot abandons the chopper in the woods and walks away. Admitting, the squad team discovers that the bombs were just a couple of cheap toolboxes with a bulb powered by a 9-volt battery. The result? An insurmountable amount of disbelief for the Swedish authorities and severe immediate lack of cash availability for the capital city. And now it was time to hunt down the goose. You see, the Swedish authorities, especially the National Criminal Investigation Department, RKP for short, had the idea about a big robbery in Stockholm months before it actually happened, but somehow they ignored it. Goran Bojovic, the prime suspect in the heist, was no ordinary man, and the crime detail at the RKP had long suspected him in cooking something big. The Serbian ministry, through diplomatic channels, had alerted Swedish authorities about Bojovic, especially when he got in touch with Swedish mafia man Milan Sivo. Sivo was no ordinary man, and it was a general assumption that any person having links with Sivo cannot be an ordinary and innocent person either. And therefore, the RKP have been bugging Bojovic's car and tapping phone from the get-go. However, they couldn't establish a solid link that could prove his involvement in the heist. But still, the authorities had to start somewhere. After digging more into the intel provided by Serbian authorities, RKP did find a communication exchange between Bojovic and Sevo discussing a major heist that would involve a helicopter. RKP now had a trail, and the mission to chase down the goose was on the shoulders of RKP lead investigator Jonas Hildeby. Hildeby was skilled in geographical profiling, an investigation technique in criminology where investigators analyze crime locations to determine the most likely area of an offender's residence and close-by communications. Fortunately, it was easy for Hildeby to build a phone network profile that was active during the hours of the heist, because most of the city was asleep and roughly 18,000 phones were active during the time, which is significantly less than millions of phones that are active during the daytime. However, finding a homogeneous pattern in call networks called a closed network loop or circuit was still like finding a needle in a haystack. A closed network circuit is basically a bunch of phones that talk to each other and to each other only. And out of thousands of network web, finding a pattern is only possible if those few devices has only contacted each other during particular hours. If even 1 or 2 devices contact too much out of the network, the pattern will break and get lost in the web. However, fortunately for Hildeby's team, they did manage to find a closed circuit that was operating during the hours of the heist and only communicated to each other. Remember, Bojovic asked Charbil Chabo to buy 5 prepaid phones days before the heist? These 5 phones plus other 8 phones created a miniature network and were super active on the day of the heist. And after the heist, all went dead, which was the clear indication these could be the devices used in the mission and could lead to the prime suspects. Hildeby's team created a time-stamped profiles of the major phones in the network and solved a particular pattern. At 2:55 a.m., Phone 1 calls Phone 5 from Meeting Police Heliport, where Nemanja Alic reports police chopper's last flight. At 3:13 a.m., Phone 2 calls Phone 5 from Norrtälje, where the red and white Bell 206 helicopter was stolen from. Between 3 to 4 a.m., Phone 8, 11, 12, and 13 contacts Phone 5 from Västerberga area, where other crew members laid caltrops and spike chains. At 4:38, Phone 2 contacts Phone 5 again and is now airborne. At 4:43, Phone 3 and 7 calls Phone 5 from Kanan Beach, informing the beach is cleared to land and receive the payload. Between 4:43 and 5:02, phone 5 and phone 2 gets in immediate proximity and are airborne. At 5:13 a.m., phone 1 contacts phone 5 again to report fake bombs are in place. At 5:50, phone 2 and 7 make final calls to phone 5 and the rest of the phones go silent. This layer of network gave detailed pictures to Hildebeest's team with the exact location and time of their operation. Now, they had to associate these phones with people. You see, phone 2 was active in Norrtälje when the Heist helicopter was stolen. So the investigators prepared a list of people who owned personal helicopters in Stockholm and parked them in Norrtälje's commercial hangar. Out of many, a name Alexander Eriksson popped up. It's because Eriksson had his chopper registered to an address in Österu, which wasn't far from Norrtälje. However, nothing obvious came up that would link Eriksson to the heist, until one of the investigators found a car's address same as Eriksson's helicopter address in Österu. It's because an undercover cop was keeping an eye on Goran Bojovic when he met with two other people months before the heist at Skeppsholmen Island. She ran the car's number plate in which Bojovic had arrived with another man. This was way too many coincidences to not link Eriksson to the case. They had enough evidence to go full aggressive on their prime suspects. The Swedish police arrest Bojovic from his apartment and find huge sums of cash in his closet. The next day, police arrested Eriksson from the airport, who was fleeing to the Canary Islands. In the coming days, Charo is arrested for the phones he purchased for the heist. In the summer of 2010, DNA reports came in positive of a man named Safah Khadoum who had cut his hand while climbing the ladder. He was arrested in the Dominican Republic after the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration tipped off his location. In the coming months, more than 10 people were convicted and charged for the heist of G4S repository. However, Nemanja Alic, whose DNA was found on the half-burned gloves found in the bushes near Mitting heliport, escaped the conviction based on the argument that someone had borrowed his gloves and lighter, and then he never got his gloves or lighter back. And the money? Well, out of $5 million, only a fraction was found at Bojovic's apartment, and rest still remains a mystery.